in the not-too-distant future, following the rapid succession of World Wars III and IV, plus the hidden horrors of secret World War II. There's not much left. All that remains is a place where folks get together to read and discuss comic books. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they argue, but they always record and upload their transmissions. You've found one of those transmissions today. Welcome to The Last Comic Shop.
Hey, it is time for more of The Last Comic Shop!
Where we open up the shop to newbies in order to help them find their way under the comic book tent.
And where we keep the lights on for the oldies so they can level up by reading and talking about the comic books. Although on this program, we're going to be doing a little more than just talking about comic books. We actually have a movie review. Hooray! We finally get movies back in movie theaters. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined, of course, by J.A. Scott and Chad Smith, who you've heard. And if you're wondering what we're going to be doing on today's program, well, first we're going to talk about the comic book. It is Taskmaster. But in addition to doing the Taskmaster 5-issue limited series that recently came out from Marvel, we'll also be reviewing the Black Widow movie, which happens to feature Taskmaster as the main heavy. So there is some kind of synergy in today's movie book picks. So hopefully if you've gone out and seen Black Widow in either the theaters or on Disney Plus, and you're like, wow, that Taskmaster villain, he's super cool. Well, here's a comic book that you can check out at your local comic book shop featuring that villain. So, the Taskmaster 5-issue series came out starting in June of 2020. It's written by Jed Mackay with Alessandro Vitti as the artist and Guro EFX as the colorist. And VC's Joe Caramagna on letters. Yes. Jed Mackay, his name seems familiar. He's doing some other books over at Marvel, isn't he right now, Chad? He is. So he is currently writing Avengers Mech Strike, where all the Avengers are fighting Kang in time, and they all get fancy robot suits. That's fun. Oh. And he's part of the big launch of Moon Knight. They're rebooting Moon Knight yet again, and Jed Mackay will be at the helm there. In addition, he's been writing the Black Cat series as of late, and he's a name that keeps popping up in various places. Very, very cool. All right, let's get to that 10-cent synopsis. J.A., you want to do the honors this week?
Sure. So this takes place in a world where Maria Hill has been killed by Taskmaster. Or has she? It looks like he's been set up. And Nick Fury comes to the rescue because that's what Nick Fury does. Takes Taskmaster under his wing because he needs to find out why and who killed Maria Hill and why Taskmaster was set up. So they band together to figure out this problem, and hunting Taskmaster the entire time is the Black Widow. And she's going to kill Taskmaster for killing Maria Hill. And Taskmaster has to basically go and find these people so he can emulate them to unlock this thing, and it kind of gets spy-y around there. But basically, it's Taskmaster versus the world, and he wins by losing a lot.
Yeah! Yeah, and that's my initial thoughts on the Taskmaster character. I won't lie that I really, really enjoyed Taskmaster in this book. I feel like for those folks that are listening to our Hawkeye Freefall show, he is like equal but opposite to Hawkeye in that he's a baddie. There's no question he's a bad dude. But at the same time, he's kind of got those lovable scoundrel-esque aspects of it and his own moral code, which actually makes him very, very interesting. I think the most telling part of this book is towards the end when he's running away from, Black Widow or something, and he says, you know why I've stayed in the game so long? It's because I know when to cut and run. Like, I'm not one of these super baddies that, like, will stick in the fight out of pride or honor or something. No. If the heat's on, I'm getting the heck out of Dodge. And it was refreshing to hear a supervillain with that kind of candor. So I really did enjoy this book just from the regards of the main character of Taskmaster.
Well, that raises a question. When did Black Widow get retconned into, like, the world's most senior badass assassin? Like, you know, I mean, in the level of assassins, she's supposed to be better than Elektra. They don't mention Deadpool, but, I mean, come on. It's Black Widow. In the 80s, she was the useless.
She was always manning the computers back at the station. But no, I appreciated they made Black Widow almost in, like, that Punisher role. That you'll often see the Punisher as, like, the boogeyman, you know, that's out to get these criminals. And when they talk about Black Widow, and you see Taskmaster talk about Widow with, you know, fear in his eyes, you know, fear behind a skeleton mask, I thought it was really cool, and it went a long way to elevate that character. Just because I feel like it makes sense. Black Widow is a character that is not front and center, like your Captain America's or your Spider-Man, so she does more of, like, the tactical espionage stuff. But for the people in those circles, like, you would recognize, well, wait a minute, you know, if she's still around and still kicking, you know, there's something to it. Right. But I do agree with J.A. in the fact that, like, at times, you know, it's kind of like our conversation a little while ago about power levels, right? And it's all about the writer. Like, if you want a writer to come in and say, like, look, we need, you know, Black Widow to be a credible, you know, antagonist in this. Like, you know, we need to pump her tires, you know, significantly so that she feels like this ominous presence throughout these 5 issues, always just one step behind Taskmaster and pushing him forward in something. I mean, I will be honest, like, other books might not do that with this character, but I will say that one of the benefits this particular book and when it comes out is this is post Secret Empire, in which Black Widow is killed.
Yeah, you can't kill her. She's the worst.
That's right.
She's just going to come back.
Captain America snapped her freaking neck, and now she's back. And I think as any person that's just like a standard street level character, whether you're, you know, Taskmaster or what have you, like, these type of characters, they're not supposed to come back. Like, that's more ground level. That's boots level. That's like, you're not supposed to be immortal or come back or whatever. So the fact that Black Widow can't be quote unquote killed and she's come back from the dead, that's got to be unnerving for any supervillain. It naturally pumps her tires a little bit, just that fact. And I take a little bit of umbrage just because this is Black Widow swimming in Black Widow's pond, so to speak. Like, you're dealing with the spies, you're dealing with the SHIELD agents, you're dealing with the espionage. Like, that's where she lives, that's where she makes her bones. And so, whereas she's presented as this over-the-top force, like, I believed it. I bought in, like, in this world, like, Black Widow would be one of the tops of the heap.
No, yeah, don't get me wrong, I loved it. It's not the Black Widow I know who's, you know, punching the computers back at Avengers headquarters and
wearing the fishnet stockings and that weird, that weird mask like she was in the 1960s. Boy, go back and look at some old Black Widow costumes. They're just awful. I don't know. I like the 80s one, the gray one with the spider. That was good. Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of the 70s one when she was hanging out with Daredevil. I was a huge fan of that costume. But go back and look at her 60s costume. It's rough.
But if we're going to talk about, like, bad characters, it starts and stops with Hyperion. Really? Just why?
Wow! You know what? That was my favorite issue. Now, again, for those folks that maybe haven't read the series, I mean, what it is like, you know, Taskmaster has to go around and he has to go to all these different places and pretty much MacGuffin people. Like, the people are the MacGuffins. Like, he has to, you know, find Agent Coulson, who's leading the Squadron Supreme right now. That's where Hyperion comes in. And then there's Okoye from Wakanda.
And this woman in Korea.
Which I never heard of her, actually. But regardless, the second issue is all about him basically fighting against Superman. Again, that might get my analogy about Hawkeye and like how he's the equal but opposite. He even steals one of Hawkeye's moves with the boomerang.
Which I don't know how that works physically. Just physics doesn't work on that one. But
it's comic book physics.
I mean, Hyperion is... I get that Marvel and DC have a lot of analogs, but that one's just how could How can Marvel get away with that without getting sued? Seriously.
I mean, I guess, as I said, I was a big fan of Mark Winwald's Squadron Supreme, and right now, the sleeper hit of the summer for me has been this Heroes Reborn, which is all about, like, what would happen in a world that didn't have the Avengers, and basically the Squadron Supreme was the top dogs, and it's basically recasting all of the Marvel characters as DC characters, it's awesome. Like, I don't know why it's working, but I love it. We're going to review it by the end of the summer, guaranteed. Yeah, I love that Hyperion issue.
Dude, I love that fight, and you see the Taskmaster there, and he's like, oh, he hits so hard. You're like, oh, and he's taking this beating. It's a pummeling, almost like Daredevil versus Namor. You know, where, like, Hyperion's giving him credit for, like, he keeps getting back up. You know, at the end of the day, it's like, why'd you let him beat you up so bad before you pulled the MacGuffin? And it's like, oh, I need to make him underestimate. And, like, that was badass.
And that's pumping the tires a little bit of the Taskmaster for sure, too. Like, I mean, there were so many cool little moments with Taskmaster in this. My favorite part, other than the Hyperion fight, was any moment when he would talk about, like, this was a Batrock kick. Or this is a Shang-Chi punch.
The last fight against Black Widow, where he breaks them all out, like panel to panel. He's like, Batrock, Daredevil, Shang-Chi, Iron Fist. None of them work. I mean, he's getting hits in, she's getting hits in.
It's even better, he doesn't know the names. He's like, that punch I saw that one time, that kick that Iron Fist uses, that time Cap threw me out the window. And, like, I love that. Like, in the Avengers book, they started doing that with, like, Doctor Strange spells and all that, like, calling these things out, but, like, Taskmaster doesn't know. He's seen them, he can do them, but he doesn't know what the hell they are.
Yeah, my favorite moment of that was in his fight with Okoye, when he basically, I think he does like a kick to the sternum. I got mad props for you now, because, like, basically I saw Batrock use that kick on Captain America, and it knocked the wind out of him, so it's got to work for me. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. You're a comic book nerd. Yeah, remember that one panel, and they did that thing? That was awesome. I'm going to do it. And he never takes off the mask. That's the awesome part, too. He's like, got that code. He doesn't take off the mask. It's like the Mandalorian.
Man, I love with Okoye how he's flirting with her the entire time. Man, you took that kick. That's kind of hot. Is there a Mr. Okoye? Like,
I guess my big question is, do you feel like this particular series, I guess, works for not only, you know, kind of setting up the Taskmaster? I know it's kind of like almost like a little bit of a movie tie-in, a little bit. Like, you know, they're putting the two characters that are mainly in this Black Widow movie. But did you guys come away with a better understanding or respect or love of Taskmaster, or was it just like, man?
I thoroughly enjoyed this 5-issue miniseries. I think he comes off as sort of, you know, he knows he's bad, but he's, like, you know, bad to a certain level and gets away with it. Very anti-hero.
Yeah, it's kind of like his costume.
Yes.
It is true. It is true. And I love that at the beginning when he's just like, I beat the Red Skull 3 years in a row or something like that. He's like dusting himself off. Best skull outfit ever. But I think it's one of those things where, again, he's likable in the same way I feel like people like Boba Fett are likable. Like, he's so cool. He does look at it as a job. He's a bad guy, but he does it for a living. You know, he's not like Bullseye, who's psychotic. And for that, you kind of can't fault him.
I would say he's cool for one reason and one reason only. It's that skeleton mask. Everybody knows skeletons are cool. That's what sell books.
I like the hood and the fact he uses a sword and shield. I always love that. Like, I'm like, who uses a sword and shield anymore?
I like the musketeer boots.
Oh, yeah, the pirate boots. Yeah, I don't know if that still works. But, no, the thing I love about Taskmaster is, one, he's competent. Like, he's got a really cool power set where if he sees a move, he can repeat that move. And that's just something like, imagine if you could do that. Imagine if you saw somebody, you know, do awesome stuff and like, oh, now I can do awesome things. But then, too, the character himself has really grown on me in the last couple of years. I've been reading him a lot teamed up with the irredeemable Ant-Man, Eric O'Grady.
Yeah.
And they made a good, you know, cowardly comic duo. They're just in it for a job. They'll turn on somebody in an instant. And that's always fun. That was part of the appeal of, like, Deadpool early on, where it was like, whoever was the highest bidder, that's who Deadpool would go with. And it's the same with the Taskmaster, where it is a job for him. He knows he's getting played in the book, but he doesn't want to have responsibility for having killed Maria Hill on him. And so he's doing this for totally personal
he doesn't want.
pursuits.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing it because he basically doesn't want Black Widow to kill him.
Yeah, there's no altruistic
Right?
motive in here.
No, he doesn't kill her, and then he leaves the sign, I didn't kill Maria Hill. Leave me alone.
But it is just fun to watch somebody be bad and be competent about it at the same time. And he has that trigger he can pull where he's like, and I'm a coward. I know when to run. And there are so many scenes where it's just him running away.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the most refreshing part of the book is that some writers, once somebody becomes so cool in terms of being a bad guy, it's almost like, in professional wrestling where eventually, they have to start making him a face or a good guy because enough people are like, oh, he's so awesome. I respect him so much. Like, he does cool things. And, there's no question. He's still a bad guy. Like, even at the end, when he, basically is willing to, almost destroy the entire planet, I guess, with his satellite from space, just because he's like, screw you guys. I'm not going to be used like this. I want them to know, the Taskmaster, he don't take guff from anybody. Again, I respect him madly for that, but there's no question he's still a bad guy. And so I really like the fact that they don't take the easy way out of he's super cool, so we got to make him a good guy.
He's doing this for his kid, and so it makes it all better, right? There's no underlying motivation that people will be, oh, now I understand. He's just misunderstood. No, he's just a competent mercenary.
Right.
But it makes it so great because while he's doing it, there's so much fun here. And I think, too, Jed Mackay does a really great job writing, from the very outset at the golf course when he shows up in his full costume. And the guy's like, why'd you have to dress like that? He's like, hey, you pay for Taskmaster, you get Taskmaster. But there's so many fun little moments like that. So many fun, silly things throughout this book. But at the end of the day, this guy is going to screw you. If you need a bastard, call Taskmaster.
And it's nice because, again, I think that's where, in some ways, Deadpool started going wrong. Is eventually Deadpool became so cool that they were just like, meh, we'll make Deadpool a good guy. Or some people will consider Deadpool a good guy. When I actually think Deadpool works better, kind of similar to Taskmaster as just being some sort of mercenary. That's just me.
But there's a reason why Taskmaster has a limited series and shows up as a background character in a lot of books, and why Deadpool has been mainlining books for 20-some years now. They had to make Deadpool a good guy so that they can sell Deadpool costumes and Deadpool movies and Deadpool action figures. And Taskmaster, he's almost too competent. You couldn't make a series out of this guy, I don't think.
He's a geek-tastic deep cut.
Exactly. He's, he is the Boba Fett, where it's if you had Boba Fett in every show, every movie, you'd be like, oh, more Boba Fett. It'd be like Stone Cold Steve Austin towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
Oh, he's going to run out. He's going to do the stunner. He's going to catch some beers. Whatever. And you get bored of it. But when used sparingly, I think that's where Taskmaster shines. I don't think he's a character that could hold his own series, over hundreds of issues. But every now and again, it's fun to hang out for just a bit.
All right. Well, it's now time for our ratings. It's a 1 out of 4 scale, and as always, every single week, J.A. Scott gives us an interesting way to rate our book. So, J.A., what is our rating scale for Taskmaster?
Taskmaster, the villain who can copy anyone, 1 out of 4 Xerox machines.
I love it. So we'll start off with Chad's, given this was his pick for this week. So, Chad, how many Xerox machines are you putting your fanny on?
So I really enjoyed this series. We didn't mention the art, but that's where I'm going to dig it slightly, just because they use so many people that are based off of MCU existing actors. And I know because of likeness rights, a lot of times they mix it up a little bit. But I didn't feel like Phil Coulson looked like Phil Coulson. The Nick Fury was just off enough that it, and I know this is the son of Nick Fury in the comics and it's not the Sam Jackson character, but that stuff was just off enough that I'm like, I don't like that. So I'm going to say 3.5 Xerox machines.
Okay. J.A., your number of copiers?
I'm giving it a full 4 Xerox machines.
Wow.
Whoa. Get out that ream of paper and start making some copies, because it was just great. Great writing, witty, tight story. I like a 5-issue run. None of this 17, 20, 25, 30, looking at you, X of Swords. Nice, competent storytelling in a limited series. Not unlike the Hawkeye show. Just enjoyed it. Art was good. I didn't mind the analogs to the MCU type stuff. Yeah, I did have to look up, why does Nick Fury look like Samuel L. Jackson? And then I had to read about it, that it was the sun and everything, because I had missed that whole part. But I do love the where he's facing off against Bullseye at the beginning, and Bullseye goes, "I'm the real deal. You're just store brand."
Like Dollar Tree version of Bullseye's.
I'm the Kleenex, and you're the Giant Eagle brand.
Yeah, it's the same thing, just in a different box. Way cheaper for Taskmaster, though.
I think in terms of Xerox machines, I'm going to have to give it a 3.5, similar to Chad. And the main reason I'm doing that is because I wasn't a big fan of issue 3. Like, it was kind of neat how, like, Taskmaster kind of created, like, an escape plan by basically filling a bunch of goons with and making them to turn into a psychic bomb so that he could escape. But it was kind of like, how did he really need to know that he needed an escape plan like that? So that's why it's going down. But I will say this, that for those folks that are listening to today's program that maybe aren't reading a lot of comic books, maybe they're here specifically for our Black Widow movie review, they should pick up this series. Because if you're an MCU nut, you're going to get a lot out of this. It's going to introduce you to a super cool character in Taskmaster, and then it's just going to basically say, yeah, there's Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury, there's Maria Hill, I know who she is. There's Hyperion, which is pretty much Superman, so you just go with that. And then you're like, oh, there's Coulson, there's Okoye, these are all good friends, and then there's Black Widow.
And there's the White Fox that even faked me out, because on the back cover, or on the cover of that one, she has that black costume and the white hair, and I thought, oh, that's going to be Black Cat. Like, Mackay writes that book, he's bringing Black Cat into this. That White Fox tricked me.
But, that issue 3 that you didn't like, though, how cool is it that he's injecting them and he's telling them, oh, you're going to have the strength of 10 men, and then they go to fight that South Korean superhero, and they're like, Taskmaster, you bastard, you cheated us.
I know. I mean, all of the issues have some sort of redeeming quality. That's why I'm recommending it, that folks that maybe, again, are sticking around just for our movie review, they should go pick it up because they're going to enjoy it. And it's 5 issues. You're in and out.
Very clever. Like, I liked seeing how Taskmaster got out of each thing. And, it revealed something about the character each time, whether it was the planning, whether it was the endurance, whether it was to make him underestimate you. Like,
yeah.
Whether it was his smooth nighttime vibes with Okoye. Hey, that's right. You do it.
I've often said that, like, comic books should be given out at movie theaters. Like, when people buy a ticket for a movie, like, they should give a free comic book. If I was giving a free comic book, this is the one I'd give. Because, like, although everybody's going to see the Black Widow movie, I think it's more important that people know about Taskmaster. Everybody knows who Black Widow is. I think it's good that she plays the antagonist in this, so give somebody else a little bit of time to shine. In case for those folks that are sticking around for our movie review of Black Widow, we'll have that right after these commercial breaks, so stay tuned for more of The Last Comic Shop.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Palatichuk. I'm an independent film director and screenwriter. I'm also an independent comic book artist and creator. I want to let you know about my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast. It's a weekly podcast where I interview other independent filmmakers and other artists from the Twin Cities area. You can find the show on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and Amazon Radio, as well as distributor Podbean. You can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So, if you're interested in how independent films get made or the process of filmmaking, also if you're interested in other artists' process and works as well, tune into my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, where it's not over till the guests say it's over.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and as promised, it is now time to get to our movie review. It is a movie review of Black Widow, which has taken a long time to come out in theaters and on streaming services. I mean, gosh, I think it was supposed to be the start of Phase 4 of the Marvel Universe, which was supposed to happen last May. But because of COVID, everything's got pushed back, and actually now WandaVision was the start or whatever. But yeah, we're finally getting around to reviewing Scarlett Johansson's potential swan song with the MCU and how she'll never come back unless they throw gobs and gobs of money at her, which...
Well, she did get, was it an executive producer credit on this one?
Well, they had to do something to make up for the fact that the entire movie was stolen from her every time Florence Pugh was on screen.
Or David Harbour. There are lots of movie thieves in this one.
That is true. It was kind of a snore fest until her quote-unquote family showed up on screen. I was like, oh, well, these folks are a little more, I don't know, funny. It's weird. It was really hard for me to get worked up for Black Widow because Black Widow is a character I don't really care about at all. And I honestly don't think Scarlett Johansson's done a very good job of making me care about her over even 1,000 movies.
Now, I forgot about your Black Widow hatred, Andy.
I was just going to say, is that because of Scarlett Johansson, or is that because of how Black Widow has been written throughout the Marvel MCU? Because she has been sort of just, I mean, she's a spy, so she's supposed to be whatever they want her to be. I think that earlier on in the series, she was a lot better, and then she just became a bit too superhero-y.
If I recall, Andy's big thing was the fact that Black Widow was now considered one of the original Avengers, and he never considered anything more than the dame in the chair.
That's true.
Back at headquarters, and he got his feathers all riled up about that.
I did. I one of the big six, not even close. Like, that's Wasp's job. She's the primary, like, female protagonist on the Avengers staff. Where's Wasp? No, I got Black Widow. Maybe it was easier, less CGI to put her in other than Janet Van Dyne. But I still kind of peed off about that. Plus the fact that Scarlett Johansson just looks sad a lot of the time. She looks sad or annoyed. And then Florence Pugh comes on and she's all excited. And I'm like, that's what I want from a superhero. I want Florence Pugh, who looks like she's all excited and happy to be in this movie, not like beaten down by a decade of doing these things like Scarlett Johansson looked like.
Yeah. I do not agree with your ScarJo hate here.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big fan of Mrs. Colin Jost and wish her nothing but the best. I think her performance is thoughtful. She carries a lot of emotion in her face that is character accurate and appropriate to the movie setting.
All right. I still think it's a strange movie to kick off a whole new phase of the MCU with, when it's essentially a movie that takes place before the end of Phase 3. But that being said, let's hear the 10-cent synopsis. Andrew, what do you got?
For those people that haven't got to see it yet, it's really the story of what happens in the aftermath of Captain America Civil War. Team Cap and Team Iron Man have fought, and they've gone their separate ways, and Black Widow's on the run from Thunderbolt Ross, and ultimately it delves a lot into her origins as part of the Red Room and how she was part of like a secret spy family living in Ohio. David Harbour, who's the Red Guardian, him and Florence Pugh and Rachel Weisz, they all comprise this little family. Over 3 years, lived in Ohio and stole some mind-controlling stuff that allowed the Red Room to really control people like they didn't control people before. Anyways, there's lots of explosions, and Taskmaster comes after some folks, which I'm not going to tell you who Taskmaster is. I'm not going to spoil that.
I will in the cast listing. Carry on.
It's pretty easy to pick out when halfway through the first set of the movie you don't say, where the heck is Olga Kurylenko? Because she's a pretty big movie star. She must be Taskmaster. I should put out that Olga Kurylenko is the only one of all the main listing cast that's actually from Eastern Europe. The rest are British or American actors.
And you can tell by the fading Russian accents.
Yes. Especially Rachel Weisz. Like, she went back and forth. I was like, boy, she really studied hard to live in Ohio there, because her accent barely exists sometimes.
The one that got me was the Dreykov. I think he forgot he was in a movie. He's just standing around waiting for coffee.
I had a hard time figuring out who that was for a long time. I was like, oh, that's the guy from the Crystal Skull movie, the Ray Winston guy. I thought it was Ricky Gervais at certain points because he kind of looked like him with the glasses. I was just like, wait a second, he wasn't in the cast list. Who is this person?
Ray Winstone, by the way, the movie, the beginning and ending of all Ray Winstone, Sexy Beast.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh my God, you've got to watch Sexy Beast. It's a British gangster flick.
But that's the 10-cent synopsis. I hope you enjoyed it. Big explosions. And then family.
Yes, family. And then, just Florence Pugh, the icon for most of the movie. Every time she's on the screen.
The moment she started talking about pouches on her vest,
yes.
I thought of Chad immediately. I was like, she's a Rob Liefeld lady. She loves that. You can stick so many things in there.
I know, there's so much stuff.
She goes, I've even added some of my own.
Like you're enjoying being in this movie. I like this. I'm sorry. That's everybody in this movie was wonderful except Scarlett Johansson. For me at least, because I was here to have fun. There wasn't a lot of plot here. And so I just wanted to have fun. And I think folks like Florence Pugh and David Harbour, they brought the fun. They brought the family. This was like a family heist movie. And they were the ones that brought that to the table. If you had just had Scarlett Johansson and the other stuff, it would have just been like 3 other movies that I already saw. And so I'm glad that other stuff happened.
Yeah, I think it struggled with what kind of movie it wanted to be. I mean, there were parts where it was like, okay, we're going to be like this hardcore Cold War, but not the Cold War, but they wanted it to be the Cold War, but the timing doesn't work out because then they would all be in their 50s if they're in Ohio in the 80s. So you've got sort of this espionage thriller bit, and then under tying all that with this exploitation of women and human trafficking. And then every so often, because it's a Marvel movie, you've got to have these big elaborate action set pieces which feel almost out of place with some of this dark theme stuff and this family stuff they've got going on. So I thought the catalyst to drive the plot along, this mind control drug, was just stupid. I think that was the weakest part of it. That's, to your point, Andrew, it didn't get going until the family showed up, and that's only when it became interesting, mainly because they got all the best lines. And I think even some of the New York Times or Washington Post movie review sites that basically it was an okay movie, but Black Widow was overshadowed by all the supporting cast.
Yeah, well, I think that was by design, too. I think Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow, that character's purpose here is basically to put over these new characters.
I like the wrestling terminology. Pass that belt on.
That's right. She's going to pass the torch. But for me, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I thought it had a stellar cast. We've already talked about how Florence Pugh and David Harbour were both great. Rachel Weisz was good. I thought the villains were kind of I've been thinking a lot about the Taskmaster. I thought it was cool, and I could see in the Taskmaster's motions like that physical aspect of the Taskmaster character. But with that said, if this is the only time they use the Taskmaster, I think they wasted the character.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is if this is just the introduction and Taskmaster is going to show up in other places, I still think they didn't ruin Taskmaster. I know a lot of people are up in arms. I don't think they ruined the character in the least. It's just they didn't tap into nearly as much of the potential as they could.
Taskmaster in the movie, not nearly as interesting as Taskmaster in the comic book. The one we just read, just because the one in the comic books got a story and a backstory and real character development. And this one is just a little bit vanilla.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought the Ray Winston, the Dreykov character, he was a vanilla bad guy too. But I did think the movie did really well with those family scenes. The family was great. I thought the spy action scenes, those were really great set pieces. The battles were good. And I did worry a little bit of what I call the Rogue One effect, where it's like, why should I give a darn about this story? Yeah. Rogue One was one line in a Star Wars movie, so they expanded out. It was a good movie. It was a solid movie, but at the end of the day, I walked out of there and I was like, I don't care about this. Everybody's dead. Who gives a crap? But with this one, the saving grace was that stinger at the end. where you've set up now the Pugh Widow and the Red Guardian, maybe even Taskmaster to play with. For that purpose, I think this movie might have quote unquote, value. But I don't like going back and rehashing the stories. Like, this movie was definitely 3 or 4 years too late.
Yes.
Not even counting the delays.
Yes. In fact, this is a movie that I feel like in some ways is going to seem better in retrospect years from now when folks can just do their Marvel cinematic and chronological order and actually put this movie where it belongs. Like,
right.
Watch it before they watch Infinity War. Like, the rest of us, we already know what happens. But for nobody that's ever watched this, which, I don't know, maybe people that live in a cave or people that are like 3 years old, like, then they're going to get a lot more out of eventually watching this piece of the puzzle where it's supposed to happen. And I will agree with you, Chad, that I like how they moved some of the puzzle pieces out on the board and then tied them to other ongoing franchises. Like, for example, I love the fact that the Countess shows up as the handler for the new Florence Pugh widow at the end during the post-credit scene. And it ties directly into not only Falcon Winter Soldier, but probably the new Hawkeye show that will eventually be on Disney+. I would not be surprised if Florence Pugh doesn't play a huge part in eventually the story about Kate Bishop and all that stuff.
And it harkens back, too, to the stingers for Iron Man 2 and the Incredible Hulk when Nick Fury was showing up places and collecting pieces. Now you just have the Dark Avengers version of that. The one thing that I thought with this movie was the character of the Black Widow. You talked about how she's sad all the time, but I thought she was uncharacteristically sloppy in this movie as compared to all the other Avengers appearances. Like, she always seemed like she was the one with the plan. She was always the mastermind, to get people to talk or get information. And in this one, whenever she and her sister Yelena go out to break Red Guardian out of prison, it's just like, you run in the middle of the prison and we'll blow a bunch of stuff up.
Yeah.
It was a fun sequence to watch, but it was like, it wasn't until the third act, just whenever she managed to trick Dreykov. That was the only time I felt Widow was like that calm, cool, like super spy assassin. But and otherwise, that third act is the same third act they've done in every Marvel movie since Civil War. The ship is blowing up. Oh no!
Speaking of the ship blowing up, that was where I was like, "Oh, really? Come on! No, thank you." She kicks Yelena away because Taskmaster is skydiving at her, and they end up jumping from piece of blown up ship to piece of blown up ship. I was just like, no, this is stupid.
Well, no, but I was a happy camper over that particular scene because I think it mirrored a lot of the first issue of Mark Waid, Chris Samnee's Black Widow series, which has a similar situation where Black Widow jumps out of a helicarrier and it's like her fall down to earth, like these shield agents are shooting at her and stuff like that. And so I loved it. I was a big fan of that. I was like, I remember reading that at the time, and I'm like, oh gosh, if that doesn't show up in the Black Widow movie, the MCU's got it wrong. Well, there, lo and behold, the MCU again gets it right with at least cherry picking great scenes from books.
She wasn't riding a motorcycle like she was in the comics.
Well, yeah. And I will say that it was weird that, like, every single time any of these big events would happen, like them breaking these people out of prison, isn't like Tony Stark like constantly monitoring the entire planet? Wouldn't he have seen something and at least sent a set of Iron Man armor over there to be like, I wonder why there's these huge explosions over here in Russia? Might as well check it out.
And yeah, you find out that the Red Room is this giant floating base in the clouds. I'm like, satellites can see through clouds, right? It's not like it's hiding.
All right. Well, let's get our rating scale for Black Widow, the movie. J.A., what are we going to rate this particular movie based on?
1 out of 4 Matryoshka.
A very, very difficult sound effect, but we'll go with it. Chad, how many Matryoshka?
I have a question. There you go. Okay.
Nesting dolls.
Nesting dolls.
I enjoyed this movie for the 2 hours that it was on. I had a lot of fun. I watched this one in my home theater experience. And normally when that happens, I have a hard time fighting my cell phone, where it's like my cell phone is right there. And like, if I'm in a movie theater, there's no way I touch my cell phone. But if I'm watching a movie at home, like, the temptation is great. I only picked it up like 3 times, but it kept my interest, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Florence Pugh was so much fun, and the fact that she made fun of everything that Black Widow did, but then did it herself and like did it with joy, that's really exciting, and I can't wait to see that in the Marvel Universe. David Harbour, he was great. But the best thing was whenever they meet up again with the mom, and she's like, "You got fat, but you look good." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." That was so exciting.
And he said in retorts, "I've been in prison for a long time, but I've got a lot of energy."
That was so great. So awkward.
It's like
You see this
looking at her like she's at
eye.
Thanksgiving dinner at that point.
We didn't talk about the pigs. How insulting was that when the pig comes in and she's like, "Hello, Alexi." Anyway, but there were lots of fun parts. Like I said, though, there were things that, the villains were weak. The third act was a little bit tired for me. So I'm going to give it 3.25
Matryoshkas.
Methuselahs.
All right. J.A., how many Russian nesting dolls are you giving this one?
Yeah, this is hard. I'm thinking that the movie probably comes out to about 2.5 to 3 Matryoshka. That's because most of the movie is like a 2, 1.5 to 2. And every time Yelena Belova is on screen, it's like 4.5 nesting dolls. So it averages out. And definitely watch the movie because you get these parts. But I found the YouTube clip. It is Yelena Belova being an icon. And it's a 5-minute supercut of all the best stuff of that. You can just watch that over and over and over again. It's just awesome. I am really looking forward to seeing her in the Hawkeye TV show. I think if they write her the way they did in this movie, she's going to steal that one as well.
Very good. I think I'm going to give this a 2.5 Matryoshka dolls, just simply because, again, to Chad's point, it's really hard for me to get excited about anything where I know what happens to the main character. There wasn't any sort of like, oh no, is the Black Widow going to survive this? Of course she does. She dies later. We know that. And again, I just felt like Scarlett Johansson had enough of this. And she was doing this one last movie or whatever. Maybe it was a movie that should have happened earlier, back when after Age of Ultron. Maybe they should have given her that one because maybe she would have had a little more enthusiasm for it. I just didn't feel like that compared to everybody else on the screen. Like David Harbour was oozing like charisma and like wanting to be in this movie so badly. Like, that scene where he's like just basically beating everybody in the arm wrestling. He's talking about Captain America is my big rival. And wasn't he in the ice when you were the Red Guardian? And he just breaks that one guy's arm. It's the best.
It's a major.
And Florence Pugh, to J.A.'s point, she's wonderful. Rachel Weisz is wonderful. Everybody around Scarlett Johansson just brought energy, and that's why the movie picks up once they're on screen. And I unfortunately, they're only on screen for half of it. There's like a half hour before even Florence Pugh shows up. So I can't give it more than a 2.5 because everything else was just kind of... To Chad's analogy, I think Scarlett Johansson was playing Andre the Giant in this. And just showed up at the Pontiac Silverdome and it's like, all right, I got to have Florence Pugh just pick me up and toss me down. And
on that note, and it's interesting, they brought Scarlett Johansson in here to do the job in wrestling terms, but I still don't know where the MCU goes from here. Like, this movie still is treading on pre-Thanos plot lines. Like, there's nothing in here that indicates where the Marvel Universe is headed now that all their major players are done. Without Cap, without Iron Man. Like, I still don't have a picture after this movie. Like, this was supposed to be the start of their new wave. And I don't think they did that. I think they spent a lot of time swimming in, old water.
But it's kind of neat that it's like another puzzle piece in the street level or espionage side of the MCU. We've gotten so, carried away in recent years with all the cosmic stuff that it's kind of cool to bring it back down and say, like, yeah, comics are also about the street level dudes.
One fun thing, I don't know if you guys picked this up or were thinking it, whenever Taskmaster was on the screen, I was like, ooh, that's Black Panther. Ooh, that's a cat move.
Oh yeah.
And I kept thinking about the comic. I'm like, I wonder if Taskmaster is thinking that in his head.
No, it was great. And you could see the moves. Like, you could recognize the body language.
Yeah, and I even looked it up. I couldn't recognize. I wanted to see if any of the stunt guys that did this movie and played Taskmaster were the same stunt people who did Cap or did Black Panther in some of the other movies, but I couldn't find a listing to confirm that or not.
Well, that would be cool. If any of our fans out there have any information on that, leave us some comments. And make sure that you also stay tuned for our recommendations coming up right after these messages. Stay tuned.
Do your hobbies include comic books, movies, television, and or video games?
Are you always behind with the latest news in the world of nerd?
Well, look no further than The Oblivion Bar, a nerd culture podcast.
Great Scott! Hosted by Chris Hacker and Aaron Knowles, The Oblivion Bar offers a weekly review of all the latest breaking news, in-depth discussions far beyond whether Han shot first, and newsletter section, where you, the listener, send in your questions to be answered live on the show.
New episodes every Monday, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts.
I'm just so freaking excited!
You can also find us on Twitter, @OblivionBarPod.
Come join us at the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
Hope to see you there.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for recommendations. That opportunity for us to fill your ear holes with other comic books that you should pick up at your local comic shop. So if you enjoyed the Taskmaster that we talked about earlier in the show, or you're maybe thinking about good Black Widow series might be out there, well, we've got some recommendations for sure. And as always, we like to do a similar book, a current book, and a book out of left field. So got, of course, our similar book this week, and that comes from J.A. Scott. And as I said, if you want a Black Widow book, I think he's got one for you.
Yeah, if you liked the movie, if you liked the Taskmaster that we just reviewed, I recommend picking up the first 6 issues. It's been condensed into a trade of the 2014 Black Widow comic. The trade is called The Finely Woven Thread. It's by Nathan Edmondson with art by Phil Noto, and it basically tells the story of Black Widow searching to atone for her past as a KGB assassin, and she goes to Russia undercover, so you get all that cool espionage stuff that we like about Black Widow, and then she goes up against this group, Hand of God. She's outmatched by this powerful new villain. How is she going to deal with it, facing all these tests? And turns out, as these things go with espionage books, it's not just confined to your past or Russia. It's something that will destroy the world.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
It is always wonderful. They've always got some way of destroying the world or something like that. But yeah, I won't lie. It was going to be one of the possible picks for this week's show. Like, I was sincerely thinking about reviewing that book. But again, I picked Taskmaster because people don't know as much about him. But that's a great, great pick. As for the out of left field pick this week, I'm going to go next. And it's really in regards to those folks that maybe are listening to our program because they love the MCU. And what better with the MCU than the Avengers? It's what everybody thinks of, and I'm going to recommend some classic Avengers, which I really, really love. This is an epic collection, which is, again, it's almost like an omnibus in trade paperback form, so you don't get the hardcover or whatever, but you get tons and tons of issues. And this one in particular is called This Beachhead Earth. And it's got the classic lineup of artists and writers that I love from my tail end of the Silver Age into the Bronze Age of the Avengers. These are issues of the Avengers released between 1970 and 1972. You've got Roy Thomas doing the writing duties, and then you've got John Buscema, Sal Buscema, and Neil Adams doing art. It has the classic team that I really love, to the big three: Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, but then you also get Hawkeye as Goliath, so he actually is huge, and he's got that, if you remember from our Hawkeye Freefall show, that weird man bra outfit or whatever, where you can see his bare chest. Yeah, he's got that. But you also get Scarlet Witch, you also get Vision in this, you also get Black Panther, Quicksilver, just a wonderful team. And they go up against folks like the Squadron Supreme, which we've been hearing about. You get some interesting stories by Harlan Ellison, the great sci-fi writer who was a good friend of Roy Thomas. He does a couple issues that kind of dovetail into a really great Incredible Hulk story where the Incredible Hulk shrinks down and becomes a barbarian in some microcosm world with his green princess Jarella. And it's got the best title of any comic book ever, The Brute That Shouted Love at the Heart of an Atom. What an epic title. It's all carved into stone. It's so great. It's wonderful.
They kept calling back to that during World War Hulk and Planet Hulk and all that, so I definitely have to check that out.
Anyways, regardless, it finishes off with the original Kree-Skrull War. Almost 20 issues here, from issue 77 to 97 of the Avengers classic run. And I think for your money, there's no Avengers better. And now we've got our current book from Chad Smith. So, Chad, what's our current book this week?
Okay, so my plan, we talked about Jed Mackay a little bit earlier, who I was going to talk about the Daredevil series that he wrote that was kind of before Chip Zdarsky's run. But I had also heard a lot of things about his Black Cat book. So, like, we'll say an hour and a half, 2 hours before the show started, I fired up the old Marvel Unlimited. I was like, I'll read a little bit of this Black Cat run. I read the whole thing. You know, it was 12 issues, an annual, and then 3 more of another series. But it's Jed Mackay. He starts off, he writes them all. Travel Foreman is the artist, and then there's a ton of other artists that show up along the way. But Black Cat, the old Spider-Man villain, she has her gang. There's Dr. Corpse, who's her scientist technology guy. She's got her wheelman, who's from Pittsburgh. And then her old mentor, the Black Fox, is looming in the background and helping her plot out things from time to time. But Black Cat is this very elegant, classy character. And each story, it's like usually like 1 or 2 issue arcs where she goes and she steals from the Fantastic Four. She steals from Doctor Strange. She steals from the Thieves Guild, which is this organization set up to be the big bads in this story. And then she teams up with people like Wolverine and Spider-Man and Beetle from the Superior Foes of Spider-Man. But it's tons of fun, and it's Jed Mackay getting to be clever and plotting out these things. Black Cat is still a bad guy, but you see her motivations. You also get to see her date Batroc the Leaper, and you get to see them have a nice little date.
Wow.
You get to see her talk to her mom, about being a super criminal. It's tons of fun. There's all sorts of heart. There's all sorts of silliness. It's the old school comics ridiculousness where she's simultaneously like she fights Blastoff along with Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four house, and then Sue Storm comes home and all hell breaks loose because you don't have with Sue Storm. But the series is great. It started in 2019. It stopped and then restarted with the King in Black event. I enjoyed every issue, and like I said, I read them all within 2 hours before the show started. I was looking at the clock and be like, all right, I have to be down there in 5 minutes. I have to finish up this last issue. But it was so fun, so good. I highly recommend it. It's Jed Mackay writing the Black Cat. Check it out.
Yeah, and I'm. It's interesting that you brought up the Superior Foes of Spider-Man. We should do that book later on this month or something like that.
I love that book. Anytime those characters show up, like the little sparkle happens. Like, oh look.
Yeah, I think it's good because this Taskmaster book, it kind of piqued my interest in, like, again, baddies being baddies. And if there's a book out there that's got baddies being baddies, it's Superior Foes of Spider-Man. So we'll definitely do that in some upcoming weeks.
That's what we call a tease, ladies and gentlemen.
So yeah, if you want to hear our Superior Foes of Spider-Man show, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to our particular program over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It's a terrific place where you can basically find all of the links to all of those podcasting platforms that we're on: Google Play, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, etc.
And if you like the show, help us out with a rating. If you don't like the show, don't bother. But no, it would really help and give us, a little bit of, hey, we're doing okay and you like what we're putting out there.
And if you go to our website, you'll also find that we've got some merch. This week only, skulls and hoodies to go with t-shirts and our beer koozies. So,
I got to get me one of those skull masks.
Where's another place you can get a skull mask, Chad? Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. You might be able to find one along with the Taskmaster, along with Black Widow, along with your classic Avengers. You can find all these things and more at your local comic shop. If you don't have a local comic shop, you can go to the comic shop locator at www.comicshoplocator.com and find one near you.
And finally, did you like the Black Widow movie? Did you like what we thought of the Black Widow movie? Make sure that you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Last Comic Shop or on Facebook at Last Comic Shop Podcast. And until next week, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson, and I was joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith. And until next week, stay safe, stay sheltered, and always remember to stay on task. Just make sure that you do what the Taskmaster would do.
Yeah, save money by buying store brand.
Yeah, it's always better. Come on. It's the same black beans, they just put it in a different can.
Andy's joke was more on the nose than the name Tony Masters.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2021 Black Angus production.